What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Breathin podcast, where everyday action meets extraordinary mindsets. Today we have Nicco Magnotto. He's a co-founder of Nic Nac Naturals. Welcome to Nashville.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, so you just got back from Austin. You've been on this podcast tour, having some fun, seeing some fun cities. How's it been so far?
Hey, can't complain. All good things. Everyone's been more than kind. So yeah, all good things. It's awesome.
But I feel like it's only right, actually. We should probably have one of these.
Oh yeah,
right?
Heck yeah.
I feel like
perfect time.
Good, perfect timing. It is a good time. We're about to be rapping on the pod. Is that your favorite flavor?
Peppermint's my go-to.
Peppermint?
I call it my daily driver.
Yeah, peppermint's the daily driver.
I like to mix in some blood orange and some grapefruit, but yeah,
it's the fruity flavors.
A little bit, but yeah, for sure.
So tell us a little bit about Nic Nac. I mean, company's founded in Spokane, Washington. Tell us a little bit about your place there. I mean, it sounds like it's a nice spot.
Hey, yeah, I love it. Spokane, Washington's a gem for sure. At least if you like, a little bit different, more country living.
Yeah, speed of life. The speed of life.
Yeah, it's definitely a big, small town. Yeah. So it's funny coming to big cities like Nashville, and it's like, oh gosh, there's traffic, and
oh man,
it's become so foreign to me, which is I'm very grateful for. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's definitely reality here in Nashville. It's like you get a lot of the fun and like the restaurants and all the things that come with the big city, but there's also a lot of downsides. We used to live a little bit closer to the city, but it was kind of a back way into the city, so you would only have 15 minutes in, no traffic. But now that we're up by the airport, you get stuck on that one little bottleneck that goes to Memphis or Nashville, and it's like, what the hell? It's awful. I hate traffic. I mean, what a waste.
Yeah, seriously, it's the worst.
So you have a background as an engineer, and I think it's very fitting for obviously engineering a product like Nic Nac. But how did you get to the point where you started even dabbling in creating this project? Like, what led you down this road?
For sure. So I'm a huge nerd, as all electrical engineers are inherently, even though I really didn't like engineering. So I got out of that pretty quick. I found it super dull. Yeah. Got my MBA, and I was super passionate about health. So I really got into that, got into biohacking. Yeah. So I was following people like Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey, and they're talking up nicotine. And, it's something I took a deep dive on and was like trying to understand and wanted to mess with myself. Right. But all the options sucked. So everything that they were recommending, I was like, why do they even use this? Like, how does this meet their standards? Right. So it really perplexed me. But it also showed me that, hey, there's this problem that, there's 50 plus million nicotine users in the United States and the delivery methods suck. So here's a really obvious problem. Let's make, the best version of that product that we can. So that's how the idea of Nic Nac started, like from a product testing and formulating standpoint. Yeah. It started off, just in the kitchen, buying dangerous chemicals and, and cooking up what I affectionately refer to now as crack rocks and testing them on myself and my family, and people were like, dang, these are pretty good. Probably should make them nicer than this and not crack rock versions. So, I learned we figured it out, made a team, scaled it up, and that's how Nic Nac was created. Yeah,
and I'm just imagining like Breaking Bad, just in there messing around with a bunch of crazy concoctions. Did you ever have a time where you were like, oh wow, that was way too much, or like was there a moment where you're experimenting and something went wrong?
Nothing's gone terribly wrong, thank goodness. Nicotine. And it's just like caffeine too. You can't buy pure caffeine, because if you accidentally inhaled pure caffeine, it would kill you. Yeah. It's the same thing with nicotine. Like if nicotine in its pure form, too much, it can kill you. Just like almost anything. Yeah. So anyways, I never did anything that sketchy, but the way that I was making it was like a confectionery approach. Yeah. It's like the way we make these now, they're tablets, so they are basically smashed into that shape. Yep. But when you are doing confectionery, you're melting everything, and so everything's really hot, like 200, 300 degrees. And so sometimes, the nicotine would kind of blast in the air a little bit, and I'd freebase it and blast off a little bit, but it was fine. Never killed me. It was never a big deal.
That's hilarious. So you talked a little bit about your own health journey, and then obviously I feel like most people, at least for myself, I can speak for myself, you start on this health journey, you obviously get in good shape, or you start exercising, eating better, you go down this road of biohacking, and you start getting into a crazy world of, far out there kind of things. But nicotine has started to come up a little bit more. You mentioned some cornerstone names that have probably been talking about it for quite some time, but it's starting to really come up a little bit more in the scene. Do you see, this becoming something that is a little bit more mainstream in terms of the way that it's looked at in the public eye to what it's kind of growing into and some of the science and the data that's coming out around it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I'll give credit where credit's due. I think Zyn has done an amazing job of getting, about 1 million people to use products that at least they're not inhaling, right?
Yeah.
So 50 million plus Americans use nicotine. I think Zyn is a better choice. This is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think Zyn's a better choice than vaping or smoking. I think that's pretty obvious. I think that, it's going to continue to move that direction. People still need to be educated quite a bit on nicotine outside the context of tobacco. So if you look at like the WHO, their cancer research division says that, hey, there's no evidence nicotine causes cancer. Or if you look at like the United States Surgeon General, they say, hey, there's no evidence that nicotine causes cancer. So no one's ever been able to connect those dots. I think the animal models are pretty strong in indicating that it is not carcinogenic. So I think that's a big step. I think we need more research for sure, especially like longitudinal human studies. But most of the new research kind of points in the opposite direction, which is something I'm happy to jump into. There's like this amazing new study that came out on male mice that were given nicotine, like low-dose nicotine chronically, and it restored NAD plus homeostasis, which is like a really, really, really big deal. So I'm super excited about that. Definitely eager to see some human studies, verifying that that's true for humans and kind of what the correct dosing is. But definitely exciting research happening.
That is really cool. For those who don't know what NAD is, can you give them a little breakdown?
Oh, yeah, I'd happily elaborate. I love this study so much. When I first found it, I was researching how nicotinamide is related to nicotine. And as the name suggests, they're like super tightly related. They're very similar chemicals. And it's fascinating that they act so differently in the human body. For those who don't know, nicotinamide is vitamin B3, basically a very similar version to niacin or nicotinic acid. So anyways, these researchers found that nicotine is probably a metabolite of the normal mitochondrial functions, like within that electron transport chain. And that acts as a signaling molecule. Let's see if I can remember this. It removes the deacetylization of...
Lots of words, lots of big words.
Deacetylization of nicotinamide phosphorybosyl transferase. So anyways, that's the really critical enzyme within the mitochondria that converts, that restores that NAD+.
Right.
And the NAD+ is really critical because that's the positive charge for the electrons to move through the mitochondria. And the problem that occurs if you don't have enough of these is something called reductive stress, where basically you have too many electrons. Electrons are very unstable. They want to find a home. So they're going to bleed off this electron transport chain. And then they're going to make basically like superoxidase or whatever. Right. They're going to make ROS, reactive oxygen species, all these things that are highly inflammatory that you don't want. So anyways, what they found in these mice is that, particularly, and what's cool is you could see what happens as they age. They found that because the NAD+ was restored to what they call homeostasis, like the right balance, because too much is bad, too little is bad. Right. And they found that basically all indications of aging were superior in these mice, which is wild. So we're talking about better telomere length. So their DNA was in better shape, better neurofunction. They tested better in mazes. Based on like scans, all their organs were healthier, like their heart and their brain and their lungs. Everything was healthier. And so this is what happens when your mitochondria work correctly and you have the energy available. And people are finding that like, cancer is a metabolic disease, right? So if your metabolism works correctly, there's a good chance that all your outcomes are going to be better. So that is
insane. That would be groundbreaking.
Yeah, no, I thought I found this study and it blew my mind. And I'm a huge nerd, so not everyone's going to get that excited about that. But I was like, wow, this is like the best thing ever. Yeah. And so, I wouldn't dare make a claim, but of course, as we can get into a disclaimer. We can have the disclaimer. Yes, I would never dare make a claim. We're under a ton of scrutiny. But at least for male mice, it works really good, and it'll be exciting to do more research and see if that's true in humans as well.
It's fascinating, and I think this is something that's super exciting considering the method that you now have to transport this and the studies that are going to continue to come out as it's starting to be looked at more under a microscope, where it hasn't really been in the past, and it's just been associated with tobacco.
Exactly, and not much research outside of the context of tobacco. Right. Which is very different.
Exactly. So I think this is a loaded question, right? But who is Nic Nac, or who is nicotine for?
I am required to say that it is for people that use nicotine.
Yes.
So if you use nicotine, we're trying to give you the best option.
Right. No, that makes sense. How has, when you approached the market and you started this, because I'm sure there's some regulations and intricacies around bringing a nicotine product to market. How has kind of what you initially thought going to market and kind of how you wanted to go to market changed as a lot of the environment around the compound itself changed?
For sure. So when we first started this company, non-tobacco nicotine was not under FDA purview. It was just a common chemical. It exists in your body. It's ubiquitous throughout nature. Obviously, it's in the tobacco plant, but it's also in nightshades. So it's in the eggplant and tomatoes and all these things. Yep. So just like caffeine, it's like caffeine you can find in a bunch of plants. Same with nicotine. It's very common. So it wasn't a big deal. We weren't under a lot of pressure. And then because of a random omnibus bill, magically nicotine became tobacco. So now we're a tobacco product. I think that happened in 2021.
Interesting.
Yep. So we have to report to the tobacco arm of the FDA.
Okay.
And so we're registered with them. It's not an easy process by any means.
I would imagine.
No, it's pretty terrible, but
sounds strenuous.
It's very strenuous, and it's the way that it works is really backwards. So we're just like, we never know when they're going to come try to knock on our door and beat us up. But so, I mean, for the most part, we've obviously been working with them, and they've actually been really pleasant and nice. So I can't complain too much, but there's definitely some regulatory pressure. It's not an easy industry to navigate by any means.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure that had to be part of your thought process when you're like, okay, I'm going to start this company. Oh, by the way, it's probably in a sector that has a lot of hurdles that we're going to have to jump over. How has that been like on the business side? Obviously, it sounds pretty pleasant from your interactions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that come with that, right?
Oh, no, it's been super stressful. It's by no means has it been easy.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy process. It's super expensive. You have to do all these studies that to us seem fairly arbitrary when you can still buy cigarettes. It's like, why can't we sell nicotine? You could buy cigarettes.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, we don't know necessarily that it's just, but whatever, you got to do what you got to do. So I mean, we've definitely had some run-ins. We've had some whoopsies. So we've even gotten like a warning letter from the FDA before. So that's pretty cool if you guys ever look us up.
Yeah. No, I think I saw that actually.
Yeah. We were we were out of compliance for like a few weeks, and they felt the need to post that on Twitter. But it's okay. That's the way it went.
Hey, we jumped.
We just got right back in compliance, and now we're doing our best to do everything the right way.
Yeah, 100%. How much harder is it to get, now that you're at this stage, to get it in stores, in physical retail?
Oh, the retailers don't care at all.
Okay.
Yeah, not a big deal. I mean, nothing is technically approved, so
which is crazy.
So and it's almost like they don't want to. It's almost like they're waiting to see what the public opinion is before they make a decision. The regulators, because I think they're gun shy because of what happened with vape. So I think the sentiment with vape was, hey, we're gonna get people off smoking. This is awesome. It's way better than smoking, which it probably is for the most part, better than smoking. But what they didn't anticipate is how successfully they were going to market to kids. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the plot twist with vape. I don't think that the fallout probably should have been as bad as it was, but it's been pretty bad PR. So I think for those reasons, they're kind of nervous about like this third wave of like tobacco-free nicotine.
Once again, trying to solve a similar issue, but that would be interesting. I watched the Juul. The Juul.
Yeah.
Wow. That was pretty crazy. For anyone that hasn't seen that, I think it's worth the watch. But it made me think about Nic Nac, It made me think not in the sense of marketing to kids, but just in the sense of like, wow, there's so many regulations and kind of just ways that you have to step around something that could be, obviously meant for a positive that could be looked at differently from the public.
Totally. Yeah, it's one of those things where, people still think nicotine is going to kill you.
Right.
And I don't think there's any evidence of that, but people have that mindset. And, I don't know how bad vape actually is. I don't think there's actually even long-term research on vape.
Right.
My knee-jerk reaction is it's obviously a bad idea to combust a bunch of unstable chemicals straight into your lungs. I don't recommend vape by any means. Yeah. But I think there's some good reason there. If you look at how Europe has handled it, they're in my opinion handling it much better, because they're saying, well, look, first of all, nicotine use is crazy high in Europe.
Yeah.
But in their mind, if there's no evidence, at least so far, that these alternatives are bad, it's like, why wouldn't we want to push people onto these superior products? So in UK and Europe, they're really like, hey, who cares? Go for it. Obviously way better. Look at what Sweden accomplished. So Sweden, there's like 6% smokers now, which is like nothing.
Wow.
So that's like the lowest, I think, in like the world.
Yeah.
And then they've had a huge reduction in tobacco-related deaths. So here's a really successful model. Let's copy Sweden. And I would encourage the U.S. to adopt a similar mindset. We'll see if that happens or not, but probably not.
Yeah.
Whatever. We're just going to have to roll with the punches and see what happens.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that Europe in general, and I guess the rest of the world outside of the U.S., has such different standards, it seems, with not just these kind of products, but food in general and consumption in general? It seems so much different.
Yeah. Europe, for the most part, is a lot better. They're definitely not perfect. There's a lot of things I don't like that Europe does, but they're definitely way better. I mean, if you look at big food, which is big tobacco and big food are very similar. Yeah. You know, they both really like to make things as cheaply and addictive as possible.
Right.
You know, and these are American companies for the most part. Mm-hmm. And so they're really good at lobbying in the US, and they're very effective, and, you know, done a good job of getting stuff through.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of people too, and a lot of probably what Nic Nac is trying to do is educate people on and disassociate tobacco, other carcinogenic forms of consuming nicotine, to really nicotine as a compound by itself and what it provides and what it can do for someone who uses it. So I want to first talk about its association with acetylcholine and kind of dummy it down for someone who's like, what in the hell is that, Mason? But how does it affect acetylcholine and kind of its association with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the acetylcholine pathway, also known as the cholinergic pathway, acetylcholine in general is a neurotransmitter similar to like dopamine or serotonin or any of those. Yep. So it's a neurotransmitter that's associated with memory, focus, higher level thinking. And so that whole pathway is based on these nicotinic receptors. And so obviously nicotine binds crazy well to these receptors and basically turns up the noise, if you will, on that pathway. Yeah. Like it's very stimulating to the cholinergic pathway, and it basically acts as acetylcholine. And so what you see is just a ton of cholinergic activity when you have nicotine in your system. And this is an anti-inflammatory pathway. This is definitely, like I mentioned, higher level of thinking, focus, memory. All those are associated with this pathway. Yep. So nicotine's, like I said, just very effective at turning that up and actually doing some really interesting things in the brain when that happens. So one study I love in particular, and again, preliminary research, not making any claims, but they took 15 people and they used MRIs, and they did a neural network mapping, which is really fascinating. And there's ways to actually measure network efficiency in the brain for how effective you are at thinking, basically. And so they put these 15 people, and they had controls and all that. It was a great study, and they found that yes, absolutely, nicotine, at least in these people, increased the network efficiency. And this is a really big deal because it implies that there's probably more neural plasticity. Lack of network efficiency is associated with like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, which, generally speaking, smokers don't get, which is fascinating.
Yes.
So it appears that the brain works better with nicotine, at least for those 15 people.
Yeah, at least for those 15 people. No clue. It's funny, I was thinking about when I started seeing all this, and I, by no means, obviously being a proponent of smoking, but my Nana's in her late 80s. She smoked for her whole life, and it seems like her cognition is still very well functioning comparative to, a lot of older people at that age. So it's like, it's just crazy to think that, hey, maybe that could have been a factor in that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another awesome study called the MIND study, which is, what is it? I can't remember exactly. It was something about like mind performance through nicotine dosing. I can't remember exactly what the acronym is, but it's actually through Vanderbilt. So it's kind of funny. I just walked by there today. Yeah. So it's NIH, Vanderbilt, USC. And basically they're in this study, they're treating Alzheimer's with nicotine. The results aren't out yet, but it's definitely a really exciting study, and I'm very eager to see the results.
Yeah, that'll be huge. When you said earlier, focus, higher learning, obviously you see a huge uptick in these receptors. What is higher learning? Like if you could break down what higher learning would mean to you.
Well, I'll say anecdotally for me, I find that I'm more likely to get into that flow state where I feel like I'm really like humming. Yeah. So if you like getting into that state, well, at least for me, I find that it's very effective at that. And going back to that study, if you have more efficient neural networks, or if you have more likelihood of creating new neural networks, to me that implies that you're going to have either more efficiency in your thoughts or more likelihood of creating new thoughts or ideas. Yeah. I'm not sure how true that is.
Right.
But at least for me, that's been what I've observed.
This may be backtracking here, so bear with me. But we were talking about, caffeine and nicotine, and I think they're different, but they have a lot of similarities in some of their properties and how they work. I wonder why there's not, a specific age limit or more restrictions around caffeine per se, comparative.
Yeah, I think it's just caffeine is more common and it's more socially acceptable, whereas nicotine isn't.
Yeah.
I think that there's potentially some research indicating that it might not be good for development. Both nicotine, caffeine probably falls in the same category.
Yeah.
Should kids have caffeine? Probably not.
Probably not, yeah.
Yeah, same with nicotine. No, kids should probably not have it.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably reasonable.
Fair, yeah.
Yeah, you see kids just like crushing Red Bulls and Monsters. I think that's a bad idea too. Yeah. So
just like sugar or processed foods, and almost, you could categorize that in a lot of different ways for someone whose brain is still developing in certain ways.
Totally. Yeah. Should kids have phones? I don't think so.
Man, I think phones and just the short attention span society that we live in general could be a huge reason for a lot of the uptick in ADD, ADHD claims. And if we think about the child's brain and putting them on other types of pharmaceuticals, like Adderall and Ritalin as a kid, I just can't imagine what that does to someone's their brain development. I know there's been there's a documentary on that one too. There's some stuff that's come out around that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do it for my kids. Let's say that.
Yeah, for sure. How many kids do you have?
I have 2.
Oh, that's awesome. How old are they?
I have a almost 3-year-old and a 5-month-old. Got 2 girls. Yeah, it's awesome.
Almost 5 months. Wow.
Yep.
Brand new. That's awesome. New. Congrats, man.
Appreciate that.
So I think back to the top. Remember I said we were gonna backtrack a little bit there, but metabolism and your metabolic rate obviously has been associated with a lot of other diseases. What does nicotine do for that? I know there is that appetite suppression piece that comes with it, and the metabolic piece that could kind of fall into an advantage or a benefit. But what does that look like?
I think it relates a lot to what I was talking about in terms of mitochondrial function. I think that's probably the main reason why that's happening. I don't know for sure, but obviously there's a lot of data for a long time showing that smokers tend to be leaner, all of that.
Right.
Neurologically, there's definitely a dopamine response as well for nicotine, which does contribute to the addiction potential, which it is addictive. So I think all those things kind of contribute. So, if your mitochondria are working better and your appetite's suppressed, there's probably some fatty acids that are also liberated more when you have nicotine in your system.
Right.
I think all those things are contributing. I don't know that I think that there's probably a lot more to it than that, but this research is so new that a lot more needs to happen to see all the things that are happening metabolically.
Yeah. Do you kind of see yourself as being a pioneer in this space with almost not engineering, but obviously engineering a product, but almost with that comes an educational piece on educating the market and educating more people on that disassociation and what nicotine actually is outside of, hey, it's, carcinogens, flavored vapes and chewing tobacco that obviously causes cancer, and smoking, which causes cancer, and those kind of things. Like, do you kind of feel a sense of responsibility with that, or like how do you feel with that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We would love to go down in history as the company that rebranded nicotine.
Right.
For sure. Like, we'll see if we can accomplish that or not.
Yeah.
We might be tilting at windmills, but yeah, we would love to be that company. And at the same time, we're super rewarded with our customer feedback. So, customers write in all the time and tell us, hey, this saved me from whatever disease or
form I was currently taking.
Yeah, or smoking or whatever. So obviously those are anecdotal, but still super rewarding to hear.
Yep. And then in terms of, the product itself, right? We know that Zen has created a huge wave, and it's almost like a pop culture wave. Similar, I feel like, to what you saw with vaping and with Juul there for a little bit, right? It's almost become like a cultural thing that is starting to grow. Whenever you're looking at the two products, right? And I'm always like, I'm on board now, but I'm like, hey, you need to quit using Zen and using Nic Nac instead. But in the product itself, right? Xylitol is a big piece of that, and obviously something that's in your mouth, it's dissolving. What is xylitol? It's in the product, but what is it, and kind of how does it affect the product or the person that's consuming it?
Yeah, for sure. So xylitol is a polyol, otherwise known as a sugar alcohol. It's a natural sweetener. Humans have been consuming it for a very long time. It's actually originally from Finland. So during World War II in Finland, they didn't have access to sugar, but they have a lot of birch trees. And so xylitol is relatively easy to get from birch trees. So that became the staple sweetener in Finland during during World War II.
Wow.
And what's interesting, and we can argue about how accurate the data is from World War II, but supposedly there was no cavities in the country, and even ear infections dropped by 50%.
Ear infections?
Even ear infections.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I can tell you why I think that happens.
Yeah.
There's good evidence that xylitol is what's referred to as gram-positive. And that means, just in a really blunt force way, that if you put xylitol in with a bunch of different bacteria, it kills the bad bacteria and feeds the good bacteria. So it's kind of like a double whammy, because not only is it killing the bad guys, it's also fortifying the good guys.
Right.
And so how this plays out orally is it gets rid of these bad bacteria that acidify the mouth. And so acid's obviously really bad to have against your teeth. You want your mouth to be alkaline,
right?
Because your teeth are made out of alkaline materials, chemicals.
Yeah.
So what happens is you kill the bad bacteria, and then it also makes you salivate. And when you salivate, your body actually naturally is trying to restore that pH. So your body supplies your mouth in your saliva with calcium, magnesium, all these other alkaline minerals to actually help remineralize your mouth. So xylitol isn't the direct causative factor, but it just plays really nicely. And that gram-positive effect, that prebiotic effect, is so powerful that they found that even like pregnant mothers will have better microbiota in their infants, because of the improvement in their own gut flora. And it's through your mouth all the way through your gut.
Yeah.
So what's happening with ear infections is obviously everything is connected between your ears, nose, mouth. So if you're improving that gut flora, not gut flora, but just the microbiota in your mouth, you're going to reduce that likelihood of an ear infection.
Right. It's so interesting to me how much, obviously, the gut being, like the second brain and being the driver of a lot of our functions and a lot of the hormones and skin and all of these other things that, come along with having a healthy gut bacteria. The mouth seems to be a huge piece of that as well.
Oh, for sure. And actually just kind of touching back on that acetylcholine pathway, that goes through the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the predominant nerve that connects your brain to your gut. So when you stimulate that nerve, like you're really, they call it a vagal nerve toning, but you're really increasing that connection, which is fascinating. This is like the old coffee and a cigarette in the morning if you need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So that appears to be quite real.
Yeah, right. So also you can get rid of your laxatives and you can pick up a Nic Nac.
Yep.
That's funny. You had a previous experience in a role that was actually, working on sugar alternatives and those types of things. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's so when I got out of the engineering space, and I was like, gosh, I want to get into health and nutrition, all this. My dad actually had a business in exactly that space doing specialty sweeteners, supplements and that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, heck yeah, I'd love to come work for you, Dad. And so went and did that, and took a super deep dive on all this stuff. And so definitely can speak to, why I don't like artificial sweeteners. And I can also speak to, kind of some of the controversy around these polyols. But I think a lot of that has been way overblown. I think that there's really good evidence that polyols are really good for humans. I can touch too on why dogs don't tolerate them. I know a lot of people freak out because oh, xylitol kills dogs. And just really quickly, the reason why that happens is because in humans, xylitol is non-insulinogenic. Yeah. It does not raise insulin. You get calories from it, but only because your gut ferments it and makes butyrate. So it's like very keto friendly. Yeah. What happens in dogs is they can't distinguish between xylitol and glucose. So they have an insulin response and then they go hypoglycemic, but then their mitochondria can't take the xylitol and make ATP. So if you have an insulin response with no fuel, you end up hypoglycemic. And hypoglycemia is bad. And that's why it's bad for dogs. But it has nothing to do with humans. It's just totally different physiology. So I think that creates a lot of confusion.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on artificial sweeteners like sucralose?
I won't eat them. I don't like them at all. There was a study, I think it was North Carolina State University just did, or relatively recently. And, the claim for a long time is that, hey, sucralose is wildly stable. Yeah. The way that it's made is it's chlorinated sucrose. So that was
chlorinated.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
Chlorine isn't inherently bad, like salt has got chlorine.
Right.
So like chlorine isn't an inherently bad chemical. But when you chlorinate sucrose, if it stayed that way, I don't think it would be an issue. But there's a certain percentage that you don't excrete, and there's a chance that it's degrading into something called sucralose 6 acetate, if I recall correctly. And based on the research, this is likely a genotoxic chemical. That means it damages your DNA, which is a bad idea. There's also some studies indicating that it's probably really bad for your gut. gut and gut flora. So I would certainly stay away from them. I think we need more research for sure.
Yeah.
But these studies that are definitely indicative that it's not a good idea.
Versus sugar.
Well, normal sugar, I would argue, is a lot safer than an artificial sweetener. Yeah. I mean, your body knows what to do with it, right?
Right.
And so, as long as your metabolism, has that flexibility and you're consuming it in the right amounts,
right,
I don't see that as nearly as problematic as an artificial sweetener, where, again, you could be getting gut dysbiosis and, potentially genotoxicity.
So do you think sucralose could eventually be looked at similar to like an aspartame?
I think that it ought to be. I think that sucralose could be just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. So I really am not a fan of sucralose. I think that it's been, people have been way too trusting on that one.
Right. And aspartame, correct me if I'm wrong here, kind of came out with a lot of negative studies, more studied than per se a sucralose.
I mean, the FDA rejected aspartame like I think 3 or 4 times before it got forced through. So if the regulators then had qualms with it, then I'm guessing that it was probably even worse than we realized. So if you say that now, you're called a conspiracy theorist. But the reason why big food loves these sweeteners is because they're 300 to 600 times sweeter than sugar.
That's crazy.
Yep. And so they're wildly cost effective because you need such a small amount. So sugar, even though sugar is 20 cents a pound, that's still substantially more cost than what's associated with these artificial sweeteners. The same thing's true with even like stevia. Stevia is probably 200 times sweeter than sugar. So they're called high intensity sweeteners. Stevia is a little controversial, but the studies have been really mixed results. So it appears that it's a lot safer, is at least what it indicates so far.
Right. It's so interesting, the trends that you see in the health and wellness space where, it seems that there's been a great divide of the one side that is so, red light, cold plunge, wake up, view sunlight, the Andrew Huberman praisers of the world. And not that everything you say isn't actually very factual, but there's that side of it. And then there's the people that are like, whatever, like, let's just do whatever, eat whatever. This is life. Let's live it. Like, where is that middle? And why don't we see more people that are kind of promoting that more modern health and using Western medicine and Eastern medicine, but not really finding a middle ground?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something that we all kind of have to work towards. I mean, I appreciate the crazy biohackers because it's awesome that they test on themselves. Yeah. And, they can get the $5,000 ice bath, whatever, which is like, that's great. Good for you guys. That's awesome. You enjoy that. Yeah. I like to do an ice bath when I get the chance too, but it's not something I can do every single day. Yeah. I think, I think that there's probably was really an focus on longevity. That was kind of like the lifespan view, and then it kind of evolved into it's all about health span, and I'm gonna shorten my life doing a startup. Like I know that that my life is gonna be shorter because of this.
The amount of stress I am enduring.
Yeah. If you guys haven't done a startup, you should do one because it's a wild ride. It's pretty unbelievable, but worth it. But I think at least for me, that's how I frame my life. I'm gonna do the best that I can. I'm gonna get in the sauna and an ice bath when I can. Obviously, I'm going to work out every opportunity I get. I'll do all those things. For things that I can't control, it's like, I don't have artificial sweeteners. I don't eat seed oils. For the things that like absolutely must be organic, I won't eat them. Like I'm not going to, like, it was terrible. I was at Whole Foods yesterday. They had no organic sourdough bread. I was like, how do you guys not have organic sourdough bread? It's all freaking fortified.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want fortified, lame glyphosate wheat. I just like, and it's like organic wheat is cheap. Like it kind of blew my mind that wasn't an option. So that's just the way it goes. So
I could have pointed you to a couple good spots in Nashville. I think that's changing. It's interesting how the West Coast seems to have a little bit more gotten on to that trend. Like you'll see a lot of more healthier restaurants not using seed oils. I mean, those things are starting to become a little bit more common. In the South, it's a little bit further behind.
It wasn't bad. No, I went into some great places too, but I just happened to be walking by, so I like ran in to grab some stuff.
Yeah, no,
I was like, this should be safe.
Which one you're talking about? In the startup world, because I'm also in the middle of launching a startup myself. It's in the tech space, so it's very different. But at the same time, I'm always intrigued by talking to other founders. Like, what are some of the biggest hurdles, just not specific to the product, but like as you're building, like as a person, right? Like, what are some of the biggest things that have added to that stress, or like Like how's that been for you?
I mean, when you have the reins and, you're reported to everyone, it's a crazy amount of pressure, right? Because it's, if you have investors, you have to show results to them, and, you don't want to fail anyone. So there's that pressure, right? They're like, you need to be successful because you can't let anyone down. You made these promises, or even if they weren't promises, you indicated to these people that like, hey, I'm going to do everything it takes to like make something cool happen.
Right.
So you definitely have that pressure. You have the double-edged sword of everything is new, which I love, because you get to shed all the things that, you normally think are stupid in most workplaces, which there's so much stuff like that. But at the same time, you also have to build like clear systems so that your employees can execute and all that. So, creating that culture, finding the management style that you want, that like your company can identify with. It's certainly a challenge because, you want to push people really hard and get the best out of everyone. But at the same time, they're not in it like you are. So it's interesting to find that balance and, try to make sure everyone understands the long-term vision. Yeah. It could be tricky, but it's fun.
It's interesting because right now you're seeing, I feel like, this huge wave of people who are really wanting to start looking at entrepreneurship and getting into it. It's almost like a cool thing to do, which it never really was in the past, right? And it's like, oh, I want to be my own boss. But I mean, just listening to you talk, and you're always going to have somebody who you need to report to, or even the weight of, like you said, you have a team under you now, they have families, like those kind of things are even heavier when you're in that role of ownership.
100%. Yeah. So you have to please a lot of people. So it's like, you have to make money. Like, you don't have a choice. The business has got to be profitable, or at least you got to be working really hard to get it there. Yeah. But at the same time, you can't let your employees starve. You got to take care of them. You got to keep the morale up when things are hard. Yeah. You can never, when things are all burning down, you still have to have a smile on your face and be like, hey, everything's great. Yeah. Everything's awesome. We'll get through it. Everyone, you have to have that long-term vision and be able to step back when things are tough. And like, whenever you think things are good, like something's going to break. Like, you just know it. Like, that's just that's just startup life. And, I would love to have like a modern, like flat company, like flat in terms of like org structure. Yep. But it's like, we manufacture our product. Yeah. Like, we have to have this structure in place. And that means a lot of feelings get hurt, and that's just the way it is. And it's just it's tough, but you also have to like get work done. So it's all a tricky balance. Right. But it's awesome.
When you say we manufacture our product, what do you mean by that?
Oh, like literally, we have the equipment. We blend it and tablet it and get it in the package, and
so you have your own assembly line.
Yeah.
Just about. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We have an FDA inspected facility, legit everything. It's intense.
That's pretty cool, and I feel like that's unique comparative to really any startup. Even you're talking about clothing, you have manufacturers, you sell at a markup, and you may put your own nuance to it, but you're really building it from A to Z.
Yeah, we had to start from scratch. So the problem is, the people that can make tablets like this, either you have people in the candy space, confectionery space, or you have the pharmaceutical space. You have the supplement space as well. But either they're not willing to run nicotine on their equipment, which would be that eliminated supplement and confectionery side. Right. And then we could do it with a pharmaceutical company, but then it's like ridiculously cost prohibitive for a startup. Yeah. So when we were like, how are we going to do this? We're like, well, looks like we're doing it. So we don't have another choice, which is the best option in the long run. Like, for anyone that's building something, the more that you can control, the better. And then the more vertically integrated you are, obviously you're saving yourself a lot of margin, which is going to protect you, because you got to fight for that margin in the beginning. If you give up margin in the beginning, you're going to have a really tough road. Yeah. And try to deliver quality. That'd be my big recommendation to people. Don't compete on price. Yeah. Compete on quality. Yeah. You're not, as a little guy, you're never going to win out on price. Yeah. So that was kind of the name of the game for us.
Yeah. Especially for a product like this, it's like to be able to actually own that QC process, I feel like would be so valuable in the long term. And the vertically integrated model, it makes so much sense in terms of the lifespan, like you said, the margin in a product like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, now that we're still dialing things in, we've only been at this for a little over a year. So I think we've gotten the product to a pretty dang good spot. We'd like to get it even better. But, with this know-how, now it's like, okay, well, let's go attack Europe or whatever it is. Like, let's go build another factory. Let's not, screw the co-packers. We're doing this.
So what do you think there's a world that, nicotine in its singular form is looked at more as a supplement, a nootropic, or is it always like, how hard is it going to be to rebrand that?
Maybe maybe in a few decades we'll get to that point. I mean, I think it's going to require a lot of cultural change, and I think it's going to require. I mean, I think the proof will be in the pudding. I think that when our product, when Zyn, other nicotine-based products have been on the market for 10 plus years,
right?
And people realize, okay, there hasn't been fallout, and we haven't marketed to kids.
Yeah.
I think that's also been like a big factor in this kind of third wave of nicotine is everyone has been really well behaved. It's like we put forth everything in our power to make sure it doesn't get in the hands of kids.
Yep.
Some people have been hating on Zyn for that. I think that they've actually done a really good job. I don't think they've marketed to kids at all.
Yeah.
So if we think it's a little bit unfair too, like from our perspective, alcohol industry doesn't get any flack when it gets into kids' hands when they have fake IDs. It's like, well, hey,
right.
We did age verification. We did everything we were supposed to do. If there's some retailer somewhere that we can't control, how is this our fault? Like we didn't market to them.
Yeah.
We didn't sell it to them. So it can be kind of frustrating from our perspective that it's like, hey, when we're doing everything we're supposed to do. So, but the good news is, like, I mean, I think there's good evidence that Juul actually was marketing to kids.
Right.
So obviously that's a big difference.
Little bit of a difference. Story.
That's quite the difference. So I think as long as everyone stays well behaved, which I think they will, I think we should be good. I think that will help a lot in the long term. I think Europe will make a really big difference because their perspective is already, they kind of leapfrogged us. America was really the leader and like, hey, get everyone on vape, get off smoking, where everyone in Europe was still smoking like crazy. And then, most of Europe doesn't even vape. Most of Europe still smokes.
Yeah.
Like UK vapes. Yeah. Like they're on the vape train and they're starting to move over. And then it's really only like Sweden and Scandinavia that's like crazy ahead of the curve. Otherwise, the large majority of Europe still smokes. But at least Scandinavia leapfrogged us in the sense that they're like, well, like let's just give people nicotine. Like let's just give them nicotine and not the bad stuff. And so it seems like a pretty good solution. So hopefully that mindset, like I said earlier, is adopted here.
Yeah. When you look at a company like Zyn, who obviously is making a lot of these waves, do you look at them as competition, or do you say high tide raises all boats, and if they're successful, then this pushes our mission and our product also?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's just like rising tide, man.
Yeah.
So we'll take it. And like I said, I'll give credit where credit's due. I think Zyn has done an amazing job of providing, a great product for people that are vaping.
Yeah.
I think that, of course, our product is way better. And I think if people care about that, awesome, use our product. There is some differences for sure between our products. Like I think Zyn hits harder. I think that it probably is going to be more addictive than our product. And I could get into a number of reasons of why that might be the case. I don't love sodium carbonate. They use a pH adjuster called sodium carbonate, which is like the even more alkaline cousin to baking soda. So baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. Yep. Sodium bicarbonate isn't going to trash your gums, but there is a chance that sodium carbonate is a bit caustic. There's a study called, is sodium carbonate a causative factor for oral lesions? The idea being, if you put something too alkaline against your skin, it causes a caustic burn.
Right.
And, I think to me that's a concern. I think it'll be interesting to see the long-term health effects orally from using Zyn. I'm hoping that Nic Nac also is good in terms of long-term.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done the best job we could to use ingredients that should enhance oral health.
Right.
The reason why they do that too, from an addiction perspective, is nicotine is absorbed in an alkaline environment. So the higher the pH, the quicker the nicotine absorption. And this is why Zyn hits harder. So if you're potentially inflaming the gums with something caustic, you're drawing the blood to the location, probably increasing the absorption that way, and then also you're increasing the permeability of that buccal, that oral tissue with that higher pH.
Yeah.
And so the nicotines, of course, absorb faster. What happens when nicotines absorb faster is you get more of that buzz, you get basically more of a dopamine response. So the dopamine side of it is what's associated with addiction. Nic Nac, we tried to make it, I don't know if that's true or not, but we tried to make it as little addictive as possible.
Yep.
We totally try to put our consumer first. So yes, it has nicotine. Yes, it's going to up your dopamine. But that slower absorption is associated with higher acetylcholine. So we wanted to bias the product to an acetylcholine increase versus dopamine. And so that's kind of how our product was formulated. And so will that make it fall more in the nootropic category? I don't know, but that was kind of our intention. So some people, yeah. It also depends on the human physiology, because xylitol, as I mentioned earlier, increases your oral pH.
Right.
And for some people that have like really powerful salivary glands that have like really mineral rich, then you can achieve like the same oral pH. And
right.
So I've had some people say, oh wow, Nic Nac hits harder than Zyn. And I'm like, all right, well, you just have like some really kick-ass salivary glands. And I've had some people who are like, oh yeah, it doesn't hit at all. So this is something that we've actually patented, like using xylitol as the pH buffer.
Interesting.
As a way to remove that potentially high hazardous ingredient. So, but it does make it contingent on the person, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Everyone's so different. I mean, the same with caffeine, right? Same with alcohol, same with really a lot of these substances, sugar. I mean, it's just
for sure
dependent on.
Yeah. And that's what we always tell all of our customers, like, hey, we don't know that there's no correct dose. Like, listen to your body, go slow, and try to get the most out of it you can.
Yeah. So for someone using it for the first time, like, what does that look like? Like, what do you do you have recommendations?
I always say that our product is for people that use nicotine, but if you're going to use it and you've never used nicotine, they're really easy to break into smaller pieces. I would say start with, like, if you can snap it into a third, start with 1 milligram.
Yeah.
Because even 3, if you don't have nicotine tolerance, then a 3 could be a wild ride. We get all these people that order 6s, especially elderly people.
They're like, what?
Well, yeah, because they're like, oh, I want nicotine, and 6 is twice as much as 3, therefore twice as good. And then they email and say, hey, I was so nauseous, and it's like, do you use nicotine? Why are you getting 6s? And they're like, oh, I smoked in the 70s. And it's like, oh yeah, no, this is you don't get the 6s. That's not for you.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I've used probably just about any tobacco product you could use in one way or another at some point in my life, right? And even when I first tried these, I started with half of a 3. I was just like, let's see what it's like, right? Before you, always cautionary.
Yeah, I think that's wise.
Yeah. Just makes me think, obviously not a correlation here, but the person who eats like the pot brownie and then they're like, oh, I don't feel anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Eat another one and then exactly. Like, what?
I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah. What did I do? That's crazy. So when you think of Nic Nac and your company's mission, you talked about culture and like potentially expanding and going global, more manufacturing, etc. But what is the mission of Nic Nac?
So when we started this company, like one of the big things for us was we're not just trying to like pump and dump. Yeah. We want to make something that's just genuinely good, providing a service, hopefully enhancing the lives of our customers. And so I really want to preserve that ethos and just make sure that, we're doing the best that we can on all fronts. So that means, we tell our customers what our ingredients are when we don't have to. We put them on the label when we don't have to. We have full transparency about everything we do. We take care of our employees to the best of our ability, ensure that, we're just trying to maximize our impact and value across the board.
Yeah.
And so, I think we start with that and worry a lot less about the profitability and making money. Yeah. Just really worry about doing the right thing, and then hope that our customers and society rewards that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great route. It's interesting. I mean, I think about startups in general, and there's a lot of different routes that you can go down in terms of investment versus bootstrapping and those kind of things. Like, what was kind of your route and path to that? Because I feel like early on, capital is obviously strapped, and it's like, how do we maximize this and still grow with as little capital as possible in the early stages?
Yeah, 100%. We were way towards the bootstrap end of things.
Yeah.
So, which is great because we have not lost control or anything like that.
Right.
So that's awesome. But, we've definitely have suffered and have paid our dues to make it happen. Installing equipment and doing things way over our pay grade, and dialing in the formula ourselves, which probably shouldn't have done, but figured it out. So, I mean, that's also kind of like the benefit too, is no one cares as much as you. And so even if there's things you're not an expert in, like that'd be a big takeaway for people, is just go for it and see how far down the road you can get, because sometimes you can crack the code yourself and it's worth it. Yeah. And then also, like, you also need to know when you're being stupid though, and you shouldn't be like so that can be a tricky balance. But yeah, you definitely want to get as much sweat equity as you can. So that was for sure the case for us. I mean, at one point we literally were working from like 10 a.m. to 3 a.m. every day. Yeah. We would start late because we'd stay up so late that
I need to sleep a little bit more.
We're struggling to get in, so we'd like usually start at like 10 and finish at 3, and it was just nuts. So I mean, you have to anticipate that at some point you're gonna burn the midnight oil a bit. You're gonna get some gray hairs. Yeah. But it's worthwhile as long as you can like continue to step back and appreciate the wins. Yeah. Because you will get wins. If you keep your head down and keep fighting, the wins come, and they're wildly rewarding too.
Yeah. How long was that period of just burning, or was that some here and there along deadlines? Like, look like?
Oh yeah. So the craziest thing that happened was our equipment supplier was late, which sucked. And then we'd become friends with Mike Mutzel. So if you guys don't know Mike Mutzel, he does high intensity health. He's just an awesome guy. And he wanted to do a video about nicotine. Never paid him, not associated, just super nice guy.
Right.
And he's like, oh gosh, I love Nic Nac, so I'm gonna shout you guys out. And we're like, oh cool, yeah, thanks so much, dude. And he does this video, and we're like, our equipment is like still on, like we're like unloading it from a truck. It's like these orders start coming in, and we're like, oh man, we don't even know how to use our equipment yet. So we're just freaking out. And yeah, that was when we were like, staying up till 3 a.m. every night. Like, oh my gosh, we have to execute
so much.
We have to execute
on
right now. And so it was nuts, but it was awesome.
With a product like this too, I would think that from the investment front, you would want to have as much control over that process. If investors come in and start saying, hey, we need to lower cost or do this or that, like, how do you see that at scale for Nic Nac?
Well, I'm super grateful because our investors are just wildly like-minded. Yeah. You know, we did a friends and family type raise. So, you know, everyone's on our team. You know, all those things I said about like, hey, how we're going to run the business, all of them are all on board with that mindset. Yeah. So I think that's another critical thing. Like if you're going to take money from people, you want to make sure that they understand the vision, especially where they might not agree with it. So for me, it's more just the pressure of like, I'm so grateful to them. I like really from a position of gratitude that I don't want to mess up because I owe it to them because they took care of me. And so now I want to take care of them. But I'm not really worried about what happens in the long run. You know, there'll probably be some pressure on us, you know, if we do a good enough job to get bought out, and you know, that might create a little bit of debate at some point. So I'm more like the longevity, solidarity standpoint. I really would like to have a sustainable business long term.
Yes.
But you know, also at the end of the day, if someone makes a good enough offer and everyone's like, well, probably should take that. So I don't know. I probably would give in, but no, that's certainly not my intention.
Right.
I'm definitely not going to run the business that way.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about people like, I'm going to start so I can exit at X dollar. That's not what you're.
Well, I'm also like so worried about them ruining the formulation. You know, you see this with really good brands all the time in the health food space.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many great brands that come out, they revolutionize something. It's like totally awesome product. And then they get bought out. And the first thing they do is they replace the good ingredients with bad ingredients. And you just see it happen all the time in the health food space. It's super frustrating.
Yeah.
So I think if we ever sold out, we'd say like, hey, you can't change the formula.
Yeah.
Here's
part of the
that would be a stipulation for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's like we put way too much into this to make something. And then it's like, I want to use Nic Nac. So if someone buys it out and ruins the formula, I'd be devastated.
You're like,
I'd have to go back to making crack rocks in the kitchen and that would suck.
Does it almost feel more stressful when it is more like closely funded to family friends?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because you value those relationships so much.
Right.
And so you gotta give all you got to make sure that, you know, you doubly feel like you owe it to them.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, it's probably the best people to do it with. And then the flip side of that is, you know, if I ever have any money, you know, if that is in my cards, we'll see. But if I ever have any money, then it's like, you know, I got to be willing to take those risks on my friends and family, you know, when they have a good idea. Like give them a shot, and then also have the willingness to just like, and if it doesn't come together, that's okay. Yeah. So, you know, we got to take risks too to support each other, especially because like the startup game is risky. You know, it's like majority fail, and that's the way it is, but it's worthwhile. And you know, we need small businesses. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's worth the risk. You know, for all those investors out there, it's like, yeah, come on, support us small business guys, because, you know, think of the economy you want in the long run too.
Yeah. Yeah. You want quality.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You want competition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fine line. It's a fine line to walk in that space. And I just feel like, you know, COVID did such damage to small businesses. So I'm hoping that it starts to come back up and grow, because if you look at it from a macro perspective, there really is such a monopoly with a very small group of companies that own a lot of the food production, a lot of the manufacturing. So yeah, buy local, buy small. That's the message
for sure. Quality over quantity.
Yeah. So I'm interested in, you know, there was these studies around, speaking of COVID, you know, the effects of nicotine on long COVID and some of those correlations. What did you think of what came out around that?
Yeah, so there was an awesome study that I looked at. It was very small. I think it was like five to seven people, something like that. All of them had long COVID. None of them were nicotine users, and they gave them nicotine. And at least for these 5 to 7 people, within an hour to 3 days, all of them, the long COVID went away. So
within an hour.
Within an hour, I think for one of them, within an hour, the symptoms went away. Obviously, this is a very small study. It needs to be scaled up. But,
of course.
But what's interesting about it is, so that ACE2 receptor that a spike protein binds to, that receptor is very common throughout that cholinergic pathway. And so the theory is, for the people that can't clear those spike proteins, that basically their nervous system is clogged up and that these receptors aren't firing because the spike proteins have found their home and they're not letting go. Nicotine is so preferential for those receptors that the consumption of nicotine appears to outcompete the spike protein, so that it actually kicks it off the receptor, and then your body can finally get rid of that spike protein. That's the theory that was relayed in the study. At least for those people, nicotine appears to be wildly effective for long COVID, and it kind of makes sense because if you don't have your cholinergic pathway working, that acetylcholine pathway, you would feel fatigued, and it might mess up some olfactory stuff, and might have some brain fog. So we clear those receptors out and get things back to normal.
What was it, or why was it that they said, "Oh, let's trial this study with nicotine"? How did that?
Well, I think it's because that receptor, because that was, and I think it was very early on that they identified that, hey, that ACE2 receptor is the problem, or is that that's the binding site where this protein can enact damage. Right. And it
stays there almost like residue.
Yeah, I think that's the theory, is that it clogs up that system. So nicotine seems like an obvious solution because, hey, what binds really well to that receptor? It's like, well, you're gonna be hard pressed to find something that binds better than nicotine. That's why they're called nicotinic receptors. Right. So nicotine appears to work really well for clearing that out. But also nicotine, there's been some really interesting research on how that pathway affects inflammation throughout the body. Yeah. And so it appears that nicotine really reduces cytokines. So this could be another factor. Is like if you have too many cytokines in your body, you have a lot of like global inflammation, and for whatever reason, it appears that nicotine, by signaling that acetylcholine pathway, really lowers cytokines. And that might be part of why you see some research that indicates that nicotine might work for like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or some of these like other digestive issues, or even MS. There's a really fascinating rat model where rats with MS were given nicotine, and it substantially reduced the symptoms. So
interesting.
It appears to help. It appears to be like an immunomodulator. It kind of shifts the immune system away from the cytokines and more towards like the innate immune system. So that's kind of neat too.
Yeah, that is. It seems like it's something that touches so many different parts of how our body functions.
Yeah, it's wild, the global effects, and I don't even think that. I think we've only scratched the surface. Like I think there's more to it than that, and I'm very excited. If we can ever afford it. We've not Nic Nac's not funded any research, but we'd love to do some studies in the future and kind of
that would be really cool.
Yeah, show or figure out what's going on and see where the potential lies. So that'd be exciting.
In terms of entrepreneurship, was that something that you always kind of were drawn to? Was this your first project? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I come from an entrepreneurial family, so it's kind of in my blood. So it was always something that I was kind of like rolling over ideas in my head. Like, hey, I want to start a business. I really like the idea of doing something creative. It's not so much that I have a problem with having a boss. I have no problem with that. I think the issues that I had with working for companies is that it wasn't probably not engaging enough, not crazy enough, not dangerous enough. Yeah. I like the idea of just really pushing my limits. And so if you want to push your limits, startups are a great way to do that. So I've been just always, like I said, passionate about health. So rolling ideas over in my head all the time. And that was kind of the one that just rose to the top. It kind of just manifested itself in a lot of ways. Yeah. And then, enough people told me that, hey, you got something here. So it's like, well, what the heck? Let's go for it.
Yeah. What would be your biggest mindset tip when starting something like this?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. Like, it's got to be like faith. It's like you have to have faith in what you're doing because you're going to be really tested. And so faith is the idea of like being courageous and brave over something that you probably shouldn't do, and that you're going to get a lot of signals that it's not the right thing to do, but still going for it. Then I would say that's it.
Yeah, kind of leaning into that. Yeah, uncomfortable, a long period of time with something that you really truly feel conflicted about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to be willing to just be really out there. Got to be willing to take take criticism. You know, you're gonna piss off a lot of people, and that's just the way it is. But you know, I shouldn't say that. Like for the most part, you know, it's like 99% of our feedback is positive, which is like I'm super grateful for. But you're always gonna have someone that's like didn't like something you did, and that's just, you just have to be okay with that.
What's been some of the craziest feedback that you've gotten?
The dog one is pretty funny. We get people saying, "Oh, your product's terrible. Dogs can have xylitol," and it's like, okay,
it's not for dogs.
It's not for dogs.
Chocolate's bad for dogs.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've had people accuse us of, you know, you're gonna get people cancer and cause strokes and all this stuff, and you know, it's like, you know, I don't think there's any evidence for that, but okay, you know, you know. But I think that's it for the most part. You know, people will get like, nicotine users are so habitualized, they'll complain about like really intricate details, so that can be a factor too. But none of them are like a big deal. So some people, oh, your product lasts too long. Some people it's too short. Some people don't like the shape of the product. So yeah, there's always something.
The small stuff.
People will totally nitpick on that.
Yeah. When you talked about some of the ingredients, essential oils is a piece of that too. And if I'm not mistaken, some essential oils have a part in the transportation of the nicotine itself, or there's some effect on it.
Well, I'm not familiar with that. If that's the case, I would love to hear that, because that sounds awesome.
Is it the one of the mint flavors? I think the spearmint.
I'm not familiar with it delivering nicotine. I've seen a really interesting study where they used spearmint oil like to negate the effects of like really high nicotine in rats. So yeah, that was a really interesting study where they were giving rats a milligram per kilo, which is like that's a crazy hero dose. So everyone,
that is a head spinner.
That's wild. If you're 100 kilos like me, that's 100 milligrams. That would knock me on my ass for for at least a day. Anyways, they found that if they gave them spearmint oil or melatonin, that it would restore restore their biomarkers. But that makes sense because they're pretty potent anti-inflammatories, and you know, there's just like with anything else, like no one do a milligram per kilo nicotine. Like that's crazy. But you know, even at those high levels, it was cool to see that you can still negate those factors. So if you're like a crazy heavy user, you could extrapolate from that study that, hey, I may want to have some additional anti-inflammatories if I'm taking this, like if I'm flying really high.
What is high use? Is that just subjective?
It's not well defined in humans. So I think that's the research that needs to be done. Yeah. And then also it's going to come back to your physiology. Like how well do you metabolize nicotine? Most people have an hour to 2 hour half-life. Some people that are like that can really just go for it, they have like a half-hour half-life. So you know, there's the super metabolizers out there. I find that it's generally speaking correlates with caffeine metabolism. Like most of the people, most of the people that can like have caffeine right before bed usually can hit the nicotine pretty hard too. So I don't know what the overlap is there.
You just don't know the tipping point yet of like, this is probably where it starts leading to adverse effects.
Yeah, we don't know in humans. I mean, in that mice study that looked at NAD+, they actually did a number of levels. And at least we know for mice, the ideal amounts, it's hard to scale them up. If you took that study and just scaled it up and assumed that humans are the same as mice, which they're not, humans probably metabolize nicotine more effectively. But assuming we were, I think the low end where you saw effects would be like a few milligrams a day. The high end where you were in the sweet spot would be, I think, like 15 milligrams a day. And then where it was high and it kind of where it was a wash, where it's like you started to lose the benefits, was like a pretty high amount. It would be like 100 milligrams a day.
Oh, wow.
So, and then I think it was like even higher than that was where you started to get the deleterious effects, if I recall correctly. The conversions are really weird, and the way they did the study, they looked at the tissue, so I had to extrapolate from like the tissue analysis, but they just put the nicotine in their drinking water. So it's really hard to say how much they were actually getting. Yeah. So we need human studies.
Long story short.
Long story short, short story long. To see what and if that looks like in humans. But I think humans are probably more tolerant than mice are.
Yeah, that would make sense. How do you use Nic Nacs? And I mean, just personally, like I'm sure everyone uses them a little bit differently, but
for sure, I like the 3 milligrams. The 6 is too much for me personally. I kind of hit the ceiling on the 6s. I could do them, but they push the limits for me. Yeah. So I prefer the 3s. I prefer to get it like I love nicotine to get into a flow state. Like I'm not necessarily doing it as much for the well-being aspects, but also like the biohacker in me, like I love doing experiments. So I'll like kill a can in a day, which is 15, and then the next day not have any. So I actually did that earlier this year. I was just like going hard intentionally. Yeah. And then I quit. I didn't have any for like a month, just to see, how addicted I felt. And, it was totally an interesting experiment. And what I found that was trippy was that I thought that I'd be really missing them as a stimulant. Yeah. And I didn't at all. Like at work, I would still get in the zone, get my work done, didn't really think about it. And I found that I wanted it the most on Sundays when I was relaxing with my family, because and just because like the social aspect, like there's something about nicotine that for those people that like to get together with their family or their friends and just like argue and BS, which is my favorite thing in the world. like I love to just like have a whiskey and like argue with my family. Like I think that's the best thing. Anyways, I found that for that, it's like a Nic Nac and a whiskey and arguing. Oh man, that's the best.
It's funny. It's funny how that works, huh? Because I would think the same thing. Like I usually use them during work or to get in that flow when you're writing, or when you're about to do something serious, you really need to lock in. But then on the golf course or like something like that, I'll really enjoy them. So it's interesting, like different uses.
And I think that's what's weird about nicotine as a stimulant, right? Yeah. It doesn't tip the scales like other stimulants. Like you start to lose it. Like you start to not like be totally you. Like you get too strung out or whatever. Yeah. Whereas like nicotine, you almost get a negative. It's actually called Nesbitt's paradox, which was the doctor that discovered this. Yeah. But the idea is that at a certain point, you actually tip the scales with nicotine, and you actually get a dampening. So it's really strange that it goes from stimulant to like almost sedative. Yeah. And sometimes that makes it sound like it's one or the other. It's not. Often it's both. Right. And that's why that's really weird for stimulants. It's the only stimulant I'm aware of that does that. And so it's awesome for when you want to be relaxed but still, do it like trying to focus on swinging a golf club or whatever, like having a good time. So it's a weird double-edged sword that personally I really enjoy. I find that enhances my life.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So if I'm wrong here, correct me, but does your wife work in the business as well?
My wife doesn't. No. Okay. No. She is very supportive to tolerate this lifestyle.
I was going to say, so what does the balance look like?
I think we do a good job. I mean, the beauty of doing a startup is you can build your work right next to your house. Yeah. So, it takes me a whole 5 minutes to get to work. So when you have that freedom, that's really cool. We always take Sunday off. It's like a hard rule for our company. We never work Sunday. We do our best to not work Saturday, although we often do. Yeah. And we just try really hard to hit our marks and try to set up reasonable targets so that you can maintain that balance. So we do everything we can to quit at 5 or build systems so that we can quit at 5. Often we don't, but we just do the best we can. And then, it's really helpful to have a supportive and understanding partner. So like my wife gets that it's something noble to do. Yeah. Like she appreciates that it's the right thing to do. It's the right way to support our family. We're trying to enact and realize something good for society. And so, you want to make sure your partner is like gets that and they get the big picture. Right. So that isn't always the case for people, but my wife is on board, so it's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like that's super important. Right.
It's critical.
Like, it's like you have to put a lot of work into this thing, and then anything you want to be good at, right? But especially when you're starting something from scratch like that, there's going to be some sacrifices that you have to make, but at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice, the things that are the most important.
Totally. And it's almost, and it becomes my wife's sacrifices too, right? So she's invested in the business in a way, but when she sees it as she's invested in the business, then it makes it, from her perspective, it's worth it for her to make that sacrifice. Yeah. So it makes it like, we're on the same team.
It's amazing. What is next for Nic Nac? I'm super excited. I'm going to continue to, support. And yeah, I'm just really excited. I love the product. I actually used it before I even came on board, and it was something that I enjoyed. And meeting you now, I'm even more bought in. So what is next, and what's the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the works. We definitely have more flavors coming, so that's exciting. Cool. So all you people asking for more flavors, yeah, I've been working on them. They're coming.
The crack rocks have been cooking in the kitchen.
Most definitely. Yeah. So that's really exciting. I think we might try to do a smoking cessation product at some point.
Interesting.
So I think we'll do that. We've looked at doing pouches, maybe vapes. We probably wouldn't do vape just because it's like doing a natural vape. Like you could do it, but you're not gonna have clouds. Like it would just be water based.
Yeah.
And we could make like I was like, oh, how could I make the healthiest possible vape for the people that just like can't quit vape? It's like I don't know. Probably won't do it. It's just like
so different. The sensation of the fixation.
Yeah, it provides a lot of things for people, but it'd be really, really hard. So most likely we wouldn't do that. We could super easily do a pouch. So if we ever have the capacity, I know some people prefer the feeling of a pouch. We've looked into getting like hemp-based, satchels. Yeah, so it's not like a mystery pouch, like you don't know what it is. Yeah. I think the ones out there are actually okay. As far as I know, they don't have microplastics, but anyways. So for all you listening, it's like there's a lot that goes into R&D. So I mean, we're always bouncing ideas off each other. So there'll be more stuff coming. We got some people that want higher strength, some people want lower strength. So we'll see what we can come up with. But
it's super exciting.
More fun stuff for sure.
Well, where can everybody find and hear more? Obviously, if you check the link in my bio on Instagram at Breathin Air Pod, you can find the link and go check out Nic Nacs and have a fun little Breathin Air discount. You can use code Breathin Air. But for everybody else, where do they come and check you out? And can they possibly expect to get in stores at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending where you're at, we got a lot of stores in the Inland Northwest. We got a lot of stores in York. Got a few stores here in Nashville.
No way. Yeah, where at?
I think Marley's.
Okay.
And one more, I can't remember.
Okay.
But I'm sure we'll pick up some more.
Yeah.
We just picked up some in Austin. So I think we got some in like the St. Cloud, Florida area. But yeah,
exciting.
We'll get there on the stores front. That's a little bit slower.
Yeah.
If you guys want to buy online, we do free shipping, so it ends up being similar cost. NicNac.com, NICNAC.com. Instagram at Nic Nac Natural, no S. But then you can find all the links at NicNac.com, and we got a fun research page for anyone who wants to like really geek out on like all the studies that we've put together and found. Feel free to go there and check it out.
Well, you've done a great job explaining. Extremely well versed. It's impressive, but it obviously shows that you know your product, and I'm excited to see what happens next. So,
hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much for joining another episode of the Breathin Air podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll catch you next week.